Thank you very much for inviting me to speak today. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I thought there's anxiety disorders and depression, all these other things, but actually what cuts across all of it is worry. So we all worry from time to time, and I thought I'd focus on that to give you an example about how in clinical psychology we can think about attention. Now, worry is a stream of negative thoughts about future situations where people tend to get more and more negative, and you have your attention grabbed by that. So, you might be trying to do some work and then suddenly begin to worry about a big deadline that you have. And it gets more and more negative thinking. And there are different types of attention that come into play when we think about why is that negative thought that becomes a stream of worry in our consciousness versus the thought about the bit of work that you're meant to be focusing on. So why does our attention get grabbed by that? And one part of the answer is our attentional control. So if you think about this, this is a limited capacity resource that we use to focus our attention and also conduct cognitive tasks or other tasks in life. And at the moment, you may be paying attention to what I'm saying, or you might be thinking about a deadline. If you're thinking about the deadline, you may then, if you're concerned about it, begin to worry. And what you need to do is suddenly think, oh, actually, I want to listen. And what you need to do is drag your attention, like I talk to my clients about a mental spotlight, to pay attention back to the talk. And that's how attentional control can be thought about. Now, what we want to know is, does worry itself reduce your attentional control? So are you less able to direct that mental spot? What we did is we do experiments where we get people to do two tasks. One of the tasks is the primary task where you have to press a key on a keypad in a random way. And actually that's really hard. You need a lot of attentional control to not get into a pattern. As you see, as I'm talking to you, I've not got much attentional control on it and it's going around in a circle. There are ways we can index this experimentally. And what we did is we got people who were high worriers and people who were not high worriers to either think about a positive future event, going on holiday, or about their own personal current worry about something in the future. And what we found is that people who don't tend to worry perform equally well on the random key pressing task. But people who worry perform a lot worse. They're less able to concentrate on being random when they're worrying. So that for these high worriers, there's something about it draining their attentional control, which means they aren't able to shift away from worry in the same way. Now, another thing about worry is that most of the time, if you think about going on holiday, you'd probably generate a picture, a mental image in your mind of what might happen, even if you've never been there. But what happens when we worry, but we can also have other forms of thoughts which are much more verbal, as if you're talking to yourself about negative outcomes. And in some anxiety problems, you get mental images, which are very key. So this is in social anxiety. People think that they're coming across very poorly, and that's represented in an image. But in worry, it's much more about this verbal thinking. And you can jump from one negative idea to another. And that you will probably notice that when you have worried, you start in one thing and you might catastrophize, get worse and worse, or you might move on to other negative ideas. So when anybody worries, they tend to use more verbal thinking, but we know that that's accentuated in high worriers and people with, this is a clinical problem. Now, does the nature of worry, does the style of worry, being more verbal, does that itself lead to greater depletion of attentional control? So what we did here was get people to select two worries. We randomized the order. For one worry, they worried in their normal words and sentences way, so verbally. And for the other worry, they worried in images about the same topic, their own topic. And then they had to do a different task. It wasn't key pressing because that would be using more of the resources that would interfere with the visualizing. So it was actually a random tapping task where you have to be random around a 1 second interval, but be random. And as you can see, I'm not being random at all. I'm just going dum, 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 dum. So again, what we found was that individuals who don't tend to worry were equally good at both of these types of worrying. They were worrying in images or worrying in verbally, didn't really affect them. But people who were high worriers, when they worried in their normal verbal fashion, that actually made their performance a lot worse on the tapping task, and so they had less attentional control to be random, which was their primary task. But when they worried in imagery form, they were still having the same thoughts, but they were visualizing them in imagery form. They were performing just as well as low worriers. So it's something pernicious about the verbal nature of worry that's problematic, and it's that it grabs their attention, their mental spotlight. Now, there's a different type of attention. That's attentional control, but there's also the habit to have your attention grabbed. A bit like if you're in a party, someone says your name, you get your orientation to that conversation over there because it's automatic. Now, what happens with people with anxiety or people with high levels of worry is that when there is potential threat in the environment, they attend to threat. So here you've got a number of different pictures, but there's a gun and there's a car crash. And if you are a more anxious or worried individual, your attention gets drawn to that. And we have experimental methods to test attention in different ways. Similarly, if you think about streams of thinking, those you can attend to those more or not. And what we have found is that individuals who are high worriers tend to have their attention drawn to those negative thoughts. And we've tested that out. So what we find is that high worries have an automatic tendency to go to the negative, to go to the threat. And indeed, these different processes can then interact. So your tendency to worry verbally or worry in imagery form, we get people again who are high worriers to do different types of worrying. And what we find is that their attention to threat is much worse. They attend to threat more if they worried in their normal verbal way compared to when they worry in imagery. So there's again this interaction between different cognitive processes leading to an accentuation of an attentional bias, that automatic attention, in worry and in anxiety. So I'm not going to take you through this model, but this is a way of conceptualizing it. You've got the top bit, that's the attentional control I talked about, the mental spotlight. And in the bottom, there is involuntary influences like attentional bias, your tendency to go to threat. When you have the potential to be thinking about your work project or the deadline that's really daunting, there's competition between those types of thoughts. And the one that gets primacy is, if you're a worrier, the threat, which leads to verbal worry. But then verbal worry takes up that attentional control that can direct you, as well as being inflated itself by attention and vice versa. So that's the kind of way that we begin to conceptualize attention in different ways. Now, these insights have then led to changes in the way that I would encourage people to do CBT. I train CBT therapists, cognitive behavior therapy therapists, but also we've got at King's a ambition to really develop new digital interventions, and in the psychology department, we're developing digital therapies, and those will involve also targeting attention in different ways. So thank you very much.